Okay, so hello everyone. Here we are with Helen. Helen, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, of course. My name's Helen. I'm head of senior school PE at Dulwich College Shanghai. We have obviously been rolling out the craziness of the last few months in what feels like quite a dramatic episode, really. We essentially at the very beginning got caught off guard with COVID. We all went on Chinese New Year holiday, very naively, thinking we were going away for maybe 10 days and got stuck, most of us, wherever we were because the COVID outbreak happened. So we had to think on our feet, deliver online learning. Most of us, scattered around the globe, our students scattered around the globe from America through to New Zealand. And just having to be incredibly creative and we didn't have any resources. Most of us didn't have our work laptops and having to deliver from our phones, and it was pretty crazy, but most of us made it back to Shanghai and we got called back to school. We've been back now for, this is our 6th week. We did a staggered reintroduction of year groups, and we've had all year groups back now for, this is the 3rd week that the whole school have been in. And we've only got, after this week, we've only got 1 week left of term. So all in all, we would have done a 7-week term, I guess you can call it that. So yeah, it's been the most crazy term 2 and term 3, as everyone else will appreciate. But we just saw none of it coming at all. So it's been a bit extra crazy.
So you've got all students back in, and the timetable is, have your senior team kept the timetable as it would normally be, or is it different?
No, it's different. I mean, it's different in terms of timings. In essence, the lesson, when they happen is the same in terms of subjects, but we are governed by something called SMEC, which is the Shanghai Municipal Education Commission. So it's basically part of the government, and they literally set the rules for everything in terms of which year groups start back and when, in terms of what our school day length has to be. So we normally finish at 3:30, but since returning back to school, we had our school day extended till 4:30, but we kept our 6-period day. We just have a 15-minute transition between every single lesson, to essentially try to reduce congestion in the corridors. We encourage students to use that 15 minutes. So to go for a walk, go to the canteen, there's snacks available all the time, and just try to sort of disperse students around the school. But ultimately the day is longer.
Yeah. Oh, great. Yeah. So, I mean, I know you spoke a few weeks ago with James Sims from the Everlearner, and you were literally a week into it there, weren't you? And had a couple of year groups in.
That's right.
So now you've done 6 weeks. Could you give us an overview for those of us that aren't going back until September? And I think what you've said there about the government dictating what's going to happen, that will be the same in Dubai, but and similar countries. But I know in the UK, the head teachers have been given more autonomy to do what's best for their context. But could you give us an overview of procedures within your department and the school as a whole, related to safety of students and staff?
Yeah, sure, of course. I'll start with the whole school. So we have each morning, to get on school site, we have to all fill in, so all students and all staff, we have to complete these online health forms. They have to be submitted by 8:30, and it's essentially, you have to declare what your temperature is. You have to declare what all your cohabitants, so any children that you have have to declare their temperature. You have to declare that you haven't left Shanghai for the last 14 days. It's a quick form, but we have to do that, and we have to screenshot it and show it to the guards before we get on school site. Otherwise we are literally refused entry. On top of that, we have to get on school site, we have a health temperature form that has the 5 days of the week on it, and we just have to declare our temperature, declare what it was the evening before. It's all very centered around temperature.
Yeah.
We have to show this form. We also, in Shanghai, it's existed, or in China for a long time, it's kind of like track and trace, and it's a QR code, and it is color coded, so it's either green, yellow or red, and you're only allowed on school site if it's green, so you have to show that. It's very much kind of fingers and thumbs trying to get onto school site on a morning. You know, you've got all these forms and phones and trying to show all these different screenshots and things. So getting onto school site is definitely a bigger process than what it used to be. And then as you walk on, you have to walk through a thermal scanner, and then you're in. We wear face masks, although recently that has been reduced quite a lot. For the first 2-3 weeks, we had to wear them whilst teaching, and then I think it was in the third week, maybe it all kind of blends together a little bit. But they did say that the masks could be, you don't, it's at your discretion if you wear it or not. Interestingly, most of our students do seem to keep them on of their own, in a classroom context. In PE, obviously I'll get onto that in a bit, but not so much. We have one-way systems around school, which is all printed on the floor with arrows. We have lunchtime. Our canteen looks like an exam hall. Everybody faces the same direction. We literally have like boards that if you're sat at a table with someone else, there's a board, so you can't even see the partition between you and the next person. What else has been happening? We do temperature checks in the day. So again, this is a regulation that is dictated to us that we have to do. So tutor time used to be 15 minutes on the morning. Now it's essentially 30 minutes, but like as a tutor, we have to be in the room from 7:45 till 9, and actually the students still arrive at about 8. So tutor time feels like it's an hour every morning, and as part of that tutor time, we have to take temperatures of all the students. They then, we never used to have an afternoon registration, but now we have a 12:15 temperature check for year 7 to 9. But part of that, they have to have this temperature check taken twice a day. But we do 7 to 9 at 12:15 to alleviate congestion in the canteen. And then years 10 to 12, they go at 1:15. So lunchtime is essentially an hour and a half, but the 15 minutes at the front and the back are taking students away to get their temperatures taken. We then have to submit that form every day to like our school office equivalent. And at the end of the week, we have to collect every single tutee's health form, the one that we have to show to the guards as we enter school site. So there's a lot more. It actually feels very normal now, like very normal.
I was about to say, before you got into PE, I'm sure the first week was really weird, but now 6 weeks, it's like, right, temperature check, write that down, and yeah.
It's so normal. We actually we have competitions in our tutor room because I got so bored of it. I just found it really boring. So I guess true PE style, we turned it into a competition, and certain temperatures are worth certain points, and certain temperatures you get to steal other people's points, and we've just kind of made it into a bit of a league and a bit of fun. So but yeah, it's very, very normal. Very normal.
We've got to make a bit of humour of it, I suppose, because obviously be professional, be safe, but we don't want the children to be scared when you're holding a temperature gun to the forehead.
And that's what I felt like. I had a year 7 tutor group that I took on. I didn't actually have them before. I didn't used to be a tutor, but because we're missing some staff, I have stepped in to be a tutor for this year 7 group, and they were nervous coming into school that day, and their parents were nervous, and I guess that feeds into the students as well. So that was one of my first things that I did, was for that very reason, was to just kind of make it just a bit more lighthearted. And this just is what it is, but they are so used to it now, and they get so excited to write the rules for the game, and they just but it's very normal for them. I mean, Shanghai is a very temperature taking place. You walk into most cafes or your compound or wherever you go, you get your temperature taken. And even my 2-year-old puts her arm out all the time because she just wants, she just gets it. It's just the way of life these days. So that's become very normal. So I would say that's the main thing. It's hard to remember because I guess like these things all seem so normal now that I've forgotten what the big differences are.
Yeah, I suppose, I mean, our schools will tell us, our senior team will tell us, which way we can walk down, which corridors and form times. And things. So I suppose we're really interested in PE. So, what do your lessons look like? How do they arrive? How do they leave? Are there any new procedures you've got in place for lessons? That's something I think lots of people are going to really want to know.
Yeah, sure. In terms of like arrival and stuff, because we've got this 15-minute transition, they actually arrive in dribs and drabs anyway, which I guess is part of the reason for that 15 minutes. That hasn't been, it's interesting that we find that the students still struggle with social distancing, no matter how old they are, you know, year 10, year 12, you know, like when we're on duty out on the field, they still just want to sit shoulder to shoulder all the time. And they just still don't quite naturally grasp that part. So that can be a little bit frustrating at times, you know, because you just feel like you're a stuck record saying the same thing. You don't want to be constantly on their case, but we have to be. So aside from, you know, when we get them sat down, you know, we're obviously still having to then get them to move around. That just hasn't been second nature for them in the slightest. We basically, again, we got a bit caught, as per the theme of this whole episode for us, a bit caught off guard in terms of coming back to school. It happened quite suddenly. We had to have an inspection, and that inspection date was never really happening. It was always just kind of, it was there, it was always looming in the background that it could happen, and school were always preparing for it. But then it basically did happen, and we were always told we would get 14 days from the inspection to prepare.
Like a COVID inspection, or like an educational standards inspection?
Yeah, it's basically this SMEC that I speak about. It's them that they come in, and they obviously they look at how well prepared the school are in terms of having students back in, the systems that you've got in place. You know, we've got hand sanitizer machines attached to every wall, you know, little things like that. And I guess there was obviously, from a senior management level, a whole lot more that they had to go into extreme detail with. But in essence, the school just had to prove that they were 100% ready to be able to take back in these big cohorts of students. So we didn't get that 14 days. We got told on a Monday night, and they were, at one point they were going to come back in on the Wednesday, and luckily it got pushed back a little bit, but they did come in the following Monday. So we had just under a week. But we were still we'd only just really started our term 3 online programs. We were all deep in that, so it was just really trying to balance finding the time of, okay, what happens now in school? And there was lots of meetings, and people didn't really know, like, there was so much information giving. It was just quite overwhelming really at the time. And from a PE context, obviously it felt incredibly niggly. You know, we were being told what everybody already understands, like no sharing equipment, social distancing, masks need to be worn back then. And so straight away we were really, oh my goodness, like, what do we do? How do we make this vaguely interesting for these students? In essence, what we have done, without kind of giving you too many of the boring details, is we felt it really necessary to try and re-engage the kids with PE. I mean, online learning for us wasn't, it's hard. PE and online learning there's some really great things happening out there at the moment, but we were just really aware that our program was fine, and you know, we had pretty good turnout for it, but ultimately, you know, we have students that if they'd been in Shanghai for the whole of this episode, then they essentially went into like a big lockdown. They haven't left their apartments. A lot of them don't have gardens. You know, a lot of them have been really restricted with what they can and can't do. Sports facilities have all been closed here. Most of our students rely on school sport anyway to do sport. We don't really have, you know, big open parks where you can kick a football around. That's just not really what exists in our like local community. So they heavily rely on school sport. So for a lot of our students, you know, they'd all done 14 days of quarantining since coming back to China, even if they'd been abroad. And for most people, you weren't allowed out of your house at all during lockdown and quarantine, when they first returned. So we've just had students that most likely, we had to assume, really haven't done barely anything. So we just wanted to get them moving, get them kind of just really look after their physical well-being, but with that, their emotional well-being and their mental well-being, and just try to, like I said, just re-engage them in PE and remember that it's, you know, what the subject used to be like for them pre-online learning. So we offered up what we called projects that were just a way of them opting into something that ultimately they were more interested in, kind of just tailoring their experience a little bit. You know, we've only got a short term for some, like for year 7, they're only back for 5 weeks. So it was just a case of really trying to just get them back in and send them back on summer holidays, remembering that, you know, what PE actually is about to a degree.
Yeah.
So we offered up, essentially at the beginning, we were offering an athletics program that was focusing on running and jumping technique. We offered up a fitness program also with the view that if we ever went into a second wave and went into lockdown again, you know, that students would have the tools to be able to sort of have a little more understanding of how to conduct their own fitness sessions and what fitness means, etc. We had a dance project, and at the last minute we actually got badminton ratified. Now what we originally did, and we've since changed, what we originally did with badminton was, obviously we've got enough rackets for students to have a racket each, and then we took along a box of disposable gloves, very unsustainable, and each kid on their non-racket hand would wear a glove, a little bit like Michael Jackson style badminton. We used to kind of joke that's what it was kind of called. And that was the contact they were having. What we've actually done since, which was taken from another school of what they're doing, we have gone out and bought a bunch of shuttlecocks, and we've got a box of 50 shuttles, and we've numbered them all on the bottom. And now at the start of a lesson, a student, they take their own shuttle and they know that that's their shuttle. So if I was playing you in badminton and my shuttle's number 5 and yours is number 9, like if it's my serve, I have to use mine, I know it's number 5. And then if it's your serve, I have to get my shuttle back, just put it in my pocket or hold on to it, and you have to use yours. So essentially we never cross contaminate or touch each other's shuttle. It's very pedantic, and I have to explain this to the students, but it is what it is. And for the sake of being able to use equipment and actually have lessons that are vaguely more interesting, it's completely worth it. And we've done the same with table tennis as well. So we've numbered table tennis balls. So that's a way that we're sort of getting around it.
I like how you've you mentioned there, projects, give them choice, re-engage them with the subject, because there's research that suggests, when they've had 6 weeks off for the summer holidays, they come back and we can notice it. We don't need the research. You notice their fitness levels, their coordination, their fundamental movement has declined, because some of them come from families where sport and exercise might not be a priority. Others will keep active, etc. So you get gaps between students where before there wasn't as much of a gap. And, here in Dubai, we're in a situation where the 6 months they wouldn't have been in school. So, that 6 months where they've not potentially really spoken with their friends properly. They haven't moved moderately or vigorously, so, for me, I don't want to get them in and bleep test on day one to blast out the cobwebs or anything like that, because it's just going to be a negative experience, isn't it? So
absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that we have to remember. I think before we're so dead set on focus on, learning outcomes and and actually I just think for the beginning, do you know what, like everybody has to reintegrate, teachers as well. It's just so new to everyone, we've got to remember that as PE staff, this is just a whole new way of being, and it will become weirdly a bit normal quite quickly, I would say, but it still doesn't make it easy, just in the sense that, I don't know, I've found it a little bit tedious, I guess, like 7 weeks in, I've found, but then that's, I've been generally delivering nearly all of the dance, and I would never normally do that. I would normally have a real spread of activities, but we've all kind of almost been pigeonholed into our specialisms a little bit because it just makes sense to. And I've got so much out of it and got so much back from the students, which is amazing. But I think that in my head, I'm just a bit bored of the content. But anyway, I just think that we can't be too hung up on necessarily, and it sounds awful, like what the kids are learning as such. I think particularly that first week, 2 weeks, it's just about getting them back in, trying to re-excite them about PE again, and then you can work from there. So actually what I found in, we did the project actually for 6 lessons, because that was covering 3 weeks. And what I ultimately wanted to do way back when, before we came back to school, and I saw that we had this 5-week block when everyone was in, I wanted to do like a 3-week project to re-engage them. And then for the last 2 weeks, I wanted to do some sort of, I don't know, creative, clever, social distancing, some sort of big festival event where we could get the music on outside. And I don't know, it might have been a massive round of like golf football, or getting all the gymnastics equipment outside to create a golf football course, and all these sort of things. But then we had one of our restrictions that happened later on, so for the first 2-3 weeks it wasn't there, was that we can't have more than 25 students per space, and our entire field apparently is 1 space. So that really, I know, so that was another thing. That
barrier down the middle and say it's 2 spaces now.
I know, exactly, right? Like it's some of the things are a little bit ridiculous, but it is what it is. So we had to then jump through that again and change up. So at that time, we were actually offering up an athletics carousel. We had kids doing like jumping over in the back of the field. We had students learning running technique on one side, and then we were doing a kind of plyometric session in another part, and they were just rotating around from lesson to lesson. And then that had to be binned because we couldn't have, and this was my frustrations right at the start. We were, you know, creating things, and then even with our projects, we created an aquatics project because we were told the pool could be used, and the pool opened for a week. Like, I used it myself, and then after 1 week it got shut, and we were told it was too dangerous to use.
Yeah.
I guess like changing rooms and stuff. So, you know, we've been constantly toing and froing and trying to recreate. But anyway, so because this whole festival idea just couldn't happen, we've basically capped the project at 6 lessons, because for some, like the athletics one, it was sort of drying up a little, and then we've just re-offered out the programs again to students with the view that if they want to go back into the one they were doing before, they can, if they really want to sort of, you know, I don't know, compound their skills that they were learning, or they can go and choose a new option. And as long as we stick to the ratios, that's fine. So that's kind of worked really nicely. And it's interesting, you know, like quite a lot of the students that did dance, for example, like they have come back to it. Yeah. So we're doing a new project, but it's nice. And then it's nice the ones that haven't come back because they've gone to do something different. So it's a little bit like a win-win situation. And I think that as you start to get into things, you know, naturally as teachers, whether we've like formally planned it or not, I just think that we do get great outcomes from lessons. I think that we, you know, we're good, particularly PE teachers. I think we are very good on our feet. I think we always have to think creatively all the time because of our situations. And, you know, I think I said this before in the chat with James, like, you know, the weather can suddenly change and we've got to quickly come up with something else there and then. Our facilities get taken, we have to do, you know, basketball in the canteen, or we have to do ridiculous things. And so I think that I just don't think it needs to be overthought too much in those first couple of weeks. I think everyone needs to be kind to themselves and just kind to the students, and just
that's a nice way to re-engage. Nice way to put it. I think I really like what you've, you know, this choice, this ownership of the kids. If they want to do another block of dance, they can. If they want to go and learn some running technique or plyometrics, they can, you know, yoga, whatever it might be. And I think giving them ownership when they come back and discussing with them, like, you know, like, have you been really active? Have you been doing the online sessions religiously every week, or have you been pretty sedentary? And, you know, therefore here's some options. Think about and be honest with yourself, and that's gonna bring out a lot of personal values and characteristics in the kids, which is good. And would you say that in your school, do you feel as a leader of PE that, do you think PE has taken a more important role for the students as a whole in the school? You know, where previously, I mean, I don't know your context exactly, but was it more sports and games focused? But now you feel like you might have more responsibility for social and emotional well-being and reintegrating them together and getting them, you know, healthy overall?
Yeah, sure. Do you know what, I have to admit, actually, we've been a very kind of holistic focused department for the last few. We actually did a big change about 3 years ago. We were very sport focused, and our curriculum very much fed into the sports program. And about 3 years ago, pretty much ripped it up and very much started again quite dramatically. And so we now we deliver like more concept-based teaching. We have, we got rid of swimming because it wasn't working. Like, we were having more students sat on the side than in the water. We do synchronized swimming, we do water polo, and we teach invasion games as opposed to discrete sports. We do a lot of sport education. So we actually, and then we use the head, heart, hands model. So we actually are very, very holistic in what we do. And I think originally that's also almost what I found quite hard about this, is that we didn't feel like we could be as creative as we normally are with our curriculum because of the restrictions we have. But actually, I think that we are, I think we're just professional enough to be able to still get things out of these students in our own little ways. And, it's amazing how you can still be creative within such crazy parameters that you never would have thought you could do. I mean, one of the other things, we are actually offering striking and fielding as well at the moment in our new projects. And on the we have hand sanitizer at every base. And basically at any point in the game, if you touch the ball, you have to, before the next batter, you have to run in and quickly get a bit of hand sanitizer and go back out. But you know what, it makes the fielders more active.
Yes,
And
condition to the game, isn't it?
you know, and I think the kids feel more comfortable about it. You know, in every classroom there is hand sanitizer everywhere. And you know, even in my tutor time, I mean, it's a bit OCD, but some of these kids are just, you know, 5 minutes later they're kind of getting a little bit more, and you know, maybe we should be a bit concerned about that, but they are, I think they want to sanitize and they feel quite happy doing that. So it's just part of the new normal, just is what it is. But again, we have been thinking creatively on that. Prior to that, we were actually using we've got these like plastic kind of baskets, almost like lacrosse sticks, and we were using those for striking and fielding, which particularly with year 12 was a really nice challenge. It created quite a lot of comedy, which again is kind of what you want, right? Just got them involved. They were rolling around laughing on the floor, and it just had like a really, really nice vibe about the lesson because of the challenge it was posing. And it was almost a bit ridiculous, but also very good for them to work on that hand-eye coordination and all those things. So, you know, there's been a lot of creativity that's been thought about. But I do think in terms of how we deliver PE, I was worried that actually it would go against the way that we try to do it. But I haven't noticed a huge difference at the moment. I mean, we do a lot of team teaching normally as well, and I feel much more like I see a lot of the PE curriculum happening around me, whereas at the moment I feel very pigeonholed, like I'm in the studio. I don't really get to go out and about and see anything. And each teacher is kind of having, I know that the one teaching badminton has had an amazing experience, and she set up like a great, you know, cup, bowl, plate competition, and the kids got really excited, and it, you know, like, and I think it's how it's delivered from within as well, and your passion for what you're doing. And I think the guys are doing a really great job. But I guess, you know, some projects like fitness, it's maybe a little bit trickier to squeeze some of that excitement out, even though they've opted in and they're absolutely fine doing it. But it's just been slightly different experiences, I guess.
Yeah. So as teachers, we can expect to be kind of a bit of a roller coaster of days of frustration, days of things being changed last minute, but then also moments of, you know, joy and excitement because something we've been pushed to do and create from scratch and come up with we've never done before, and it's actually worked really well, and we've learned something new as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, great.
Definitely. I mean, I 100% agree with that. There's been some really, really great things that I've seen out of this, and you know, going back to the dancing, like I didn't know some of these girls, you know, had any level of interest, let alone enjoyment. And it's really, I feel like I've learned a lot about some of these students that wrongly I didn't know that about them before, and that actually kind of triggers some things for next year in terms of, you know, trying to get them more engaged in dance in different ways and extend their PE beyond what they're currently doing. And I just would have never known before that they had that kind of interest. And maybe with it being so it's not like it's intensely delivered, it's not, but I felt a little bit as well, like you can, so for example, in a couple of lessons, I just taught them choreography. For the first couple of lessons, I just taught them choreography like they'd gone to a dance studio. And I would never normally do that, because that to me is the wrong way of teaching. You know, like they should be creating and I should be facilitating, and, you know, I should be assessing and doing this, you know, all these things that we kind of put a pressure on ourselves how to be as a professional and in the classroom. Whereas I felt like an instructor, but actually, like that whole thing we were saying, you know, you just got to do what you got to do. And I wanted them to be socially distanced, no contact with each other. Whereas normally I'd be encouraging them to, you know, contact and climb each other and jump over each other and do all this stuff. So it was completely outside of what I would know, what I wanted to do with them. So to keep it safe and to help myself out, I just taught them choreography. And actually it was really interesting to see their response to that. They really enjoyed it. B, I then found that I was able to challenge them in different ways and just take a slightly different angle on the lesson. You know, it was more about their performance and their showing of their confidence and analysing all of those things. And even though I felt like an instructor and feel like that's possibly quite wrong to be like that, it kind of evolved and it really worked. And it was nice to be able to do something that what I would normally classify as being wrong at this moment in time, whatever, like I can just trial something different, because actually, you know, we've just got to deliver. And it did work. It's not to say I would do that in the future when the restrictions all lift, but I don't know, it was just interesting to go against the grain of what I would normally think is okay, if that makes any sense. Explain it very well.
Like you said, no, I think you've said it spot on, really. We've got to think about the context and deliver differently, and what we previously thought as, you know, outstanding PE is going to look a little bit different, and we don't need to really worry about, you know, how many, whatever curriculum you work in, levels of progress or anything's made. You know, re-engaging them with PE, we've got to do it safely, for us and for them. I really like it. I think you're quite fortunate you've done concept-based curriculum for a few years, because I think, you know, those schools that are sports and games-based, it's going to be really hard for them, because they you know, football is not happening in term one. You know, maybe you can have a box per kid with a ball dribbling around, but you know, that's a lesson perhaps, and then you've got to wipe all the balls down afterwards. But you know,
absolutely.
So you know, I'm nervous but excited to be, you know, maybe doing some dance with my class, or you know, and teaching different activities, maybe going, because we're a through school, going down to the early years and helping out there.
Same.
You know, so you're through school as well for primary. Right, okay. How has it varied then between early years PE, who love to hug and hold and everything and touch, as compared to, you know, your year 12s?
Yeah, sure. I have to be honest, in terms of the early years, they only went back last week.
Right.
So years 1 and 2 started Tuesday, Thursday, maybe. So they've literally, but their PE lessons have been in existence. We've got, so our department is a bit reduced at the moment because we've still got some people stuck abroad. So we've got one guy that is based down there, and he is just where we'd normally be a bit more cross phase. He is down there and he's doing every single lesson, and I haven't seen him because I think he's got no time at all. So the early years is actually on a different, I know, right? The early years is actually on the same road, but like a different campus. Junior school, we've got year 3 to 6 back. And they're doing a lot of striking and fielding games, like a lot of kickball style striking and fielding. There is a lot of, I don't really teach barely any junior school, but there is a lot of raucous cheering, and it sounds like they're having the absolute time of their life. So I think that the guys that are mostly teaching junior school are just coming up with these amazing striking and fielding games that, you know, never existed before in our school, but, you know, all sorts of, I don't know, crazy little rules and twists to the game. And, you know, I covered a year 5 lesson yesterday, and it was a bit of a last minute thing. And I sort of went down, I thought, oh my goodness, you know, year 5, this is a bit out of my thing. And I ended up literally just playing like a kickball game, and they had to get the ball back to the sort of equivalent of the bowler, who was inside a big circle, wasn't allowed to leave that, and he basically had to just stop it with his foot. And if any of the strikers were off base running between, they were all out. And you know, for every striker they got out, it was a point. So no child ever had to touch the ball. They were getting really into it. We still had the ability to sit and talk, you know, about what was going well and what was going wrong. You know, all the fielders just crowding around the balls, they couldn't even kick it back to their bowler in the first place. And you know, so we actually still had some really interesting conversations that came out, but it's just the content of the game.
And these are the positives, aren't they, that are going to come out of it? You know, the new games, the creativity, that there's no link to the Rounders team or to any team, or, you know, there's no restrictions. Let's just make the rules up as we go along and have fun. And that's going to be great. So sorry if you can hear drilling. My neighbour just decided to start doing some drilling. Right, I want to wrap it up really, because I know you're at work and you've got lots to do. But what would be your top tips for PE teachers returning to work? You know, maybe leaders of PE, but then, you know, also just the class teacher as well. Have you got any words of wisdom for them to prepare them mentally or anything?
I would basically say, sorry, someone's just trying to get in the studio. I think, you know, it's that whole thing that everyone just needs to be kind to themselves. This is a very, very new normal. And it's okay if you plan things and then you have to rip it up and start again. We did that about 4 or 5 times. Mostly it wasn't our fault. Mostly it was because we had the restrictions put in place that didn't exist before. So I would say it's just, you just have to be kind. It's not a problem to realize that maybe something isn't working, and to have to sort of, you know, in a PE context, that obviously is. I think that, you know, by the time people go back in September in particular, I know some schools, obviously June, July at the moment, but I guess, you know, you've got a wealth of schools that have gone back, and I guess, you know, it might be useful to listen to some of the ideas that are coming through. Like, we're just in a really fortunate time where so much is shared online, and, you know, and that's, I've always felt a little bit, we've always been ahead of everything. You know, we were the first ones to get caught out on COVID, and by the time it hit the rest of the world, there was kind of a wealth of information out there for teachers to kind of dip into. We just never really had that, so we've always had to be thinking on our feet. And then I feel like we weren't the first, but we've been in the very early set of schools to go back. So we've never really had anything to look into or read about or listen to other people's experiences. So I guess just kind of taking ideas on board, and everybody's school is so different. Your PE facilities are so different. We're so lucky. We've got, you know, we've got a couple of gyms. We do have a field. We've got a dance studio. We are incredibly lucky in terms of facilities, which is just as well when we can only have 25 in a space. But you know, so you've got to obviously look at what you've got in your school. You've got to look at the equipment you've got in your school. Again, we were so fortunate that we are able to go out and buy 50 shuttles just like that. That can't happen in many schools. So, you know, I think kind of research stuff, listen to things, like look what's out there, and maybe gather together ideas of what is happening, see what you can translate into your school, things that you think would work, not only in terms of logistically in your school, but also the students that you have. Like, again, you know, our students are incredibly they just crack on, and they do, you know, that we don't really have any behavior issues or anything, so we're incredibly lucky with that. They'll just do it. So we've been in a incredibly fortunate position in that respect, and need to admit to that. But you need to look at what the interests of your students are. Is there any way you can cater for those, looking at the constraints of what you can and can't do, mapping out, I guess, you know, like for me it all went by the wayside in the end anyway, but looking at how many weeks you've got, and can you actually even put it into sort of small chunks, you know, even if you go back to school for 6 weeks, maybe just psychologically, if you split that up into 2-3 week blocks of leading, you know, just try not to look at it as just a massive, oh my goodness, right, we've got 6 weeks and we've got to get through this. And I very much felt in the first week like it felt like just getting through every lesson. That's literally what it felt like, and we were struggling to find the time to sit and talk about it. So I guess that it's talking as a head of department, maybe talking to your department about the kind of activities that they are happy to lead and run, and maybe it might be that you end up getting a little bit pigeonholed for a small block potentially. Like, schools might not agree with that at all, but I guess that, as boring as that can be, actually, like, you know what it's like, every time you deliver a lesson that has similar content, actually you can reflect on it and make it better the next time you do it, and before you know it, you're actually creating something much better than what it originally looked like, and you become more proficient in what you're doing, so you're giving a much better experience within these parameters that we have. I feel like that's a lot of top tips.
No, that's great. I mean, you've got a lot to say. So in summary, you know, versatility, resilience, open-mindedness, be kind to yourself and others. Like, as PE teams, you know, we're usually, you know, the strongest team in the school, the best unit, the most collaborative. You know, reflect on and don't be afraid to get it wrong, to fail, and own up to that. And you know, it's almost like,
you know, we're really we've been really transparent with the students as well. You know, and I think that obviously there's a line with that, but you know, it was really hard when we started this athletics carousel, for example, and the students were quite on board with that. and we did 2 out of the 3 lessons. And so that final carousel, that might have been the activity that those kids were looking forward to. Like it might have been the jumping lesson, and we had to pull the plug on it. So, you know, but I just explained to them, you know, we've had this restriction, guys, that we've now just been told as of yesterday, we can't have more than 25 of you on the field. So I think, you know, you need to keep them on board. I always talk to them as well and say, if you have any genius ideas, we are all ears. Like, just, you know, be creative. You guys have so much creativity. Come and talk to us. And I think that, you know, it's almost them realizing that, you know, you obviously are very proficient in what you're doing, but you're also very new to this, and this is new for everyone. And actually, if you can involve them in the process in any way, then that could be quite a nice
definitely.
kind of strand added on. So yeah, and also just kind of reaching out to people that are already doing it. You know, it's very easy to contact people in this day and age, and I think that, you know, if there is, I'm sure anyone and everyone that is already back at school and doing it would be incredibly open, myself absolutely included, to just have any contacts or chats or whatever. I mean, I think, you know, the PE kind of world has always felt quite tight, but I feel like as of January, it's just kind of got even tighter, really. And it's been really amazing to see that happening. So I think that, you know, just kind of use that network to your absolute advantage.
Completely agree. Twitter and the content and everything that's out there in this past few months has been exceptional, more than ever, because lots of teachers have been at home and
creating amazing resources.
And we're never going to have this time again, really, you know. Because as you say, what it's like now, you're back at work, it's even more hectic than what it was before. So thank you very much, Helen. Really appreciate your time.